Hey, I think we've all learned one thing. A lot can happen in 2 months of baseball.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please, I'm begging you, call me Sully. I've been a baseball podcaster for a while now. This is my sixth full season here at the Locked On Podcast Network. And this year, I've done double duty. I'm going to be doing, Locked On MLB 5 days a week. I do Locked On A's 5 days a week, at least until the end of the regular season. By the way, we're talking a little bit about the A's-Giants game at the end of this podcast because it's pretty interesting what's happening in Oakland land, a team that everyone in their cow thought was going to lose 110 games, and let's just say they're having a better year than I think some people thought they were going to have. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB. Use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. And by the way, if you're listening to us every day, make sure to go leave the hashtag EverydaySully, and we get an idea who is listening to us. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter, or whatever it's called now. Same handle for Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. By the way, I'm going to continue to throw this challenge out, or at least my inquiry out. I did a podcast a few days ago about the baseball strike. It was the 30th anniversary of the strike of 1994, and I broke down the causes of it and the chain, how the season was going. And I got a cryptic comment from RJZ217 who said, "That's not what happened." And now this is my second plea. I'm begging you, RJZ217, I'm begging you, correct me. Tell me where I'm wrong. If nothing else, it'll give me another podcast to do. This is, by the way, I also want to say, I think I phrased my last trivia question incorrectly because I thought I said that who was the last person to end the World Series with a walk-off hit, the only person to end the World Series on a walk-off hit as a pinch hitter. And that's the finale of the World Series, the final game, swing, base hit, win the World Series. Who's the only person to do it as a pinch hitter? And I got about 7,000 people saying Kirk Gibson. Well, Kirk Gibson came up as a pinch hitter and hit a walk-off home run off of Dennis Eckersley, but that was game one. That was not game five. That World Series ended with Orel Hershiser striking out Tony Phillips. So I wonder if I didn't make it clear. I'll tell you the answer because I have a new trivia question for today. The answer is Gene Larkin. Gene Larkin, basically at that point, the third-string first baseman for the Minnesota Twins in 1991, came up as a pinch hitter. There was the Twins' first baseman was Kent Herbeck, and he was the first baseman all throughout the game. Paul Sorrento was on the team, and he actually wound up having a terrific career, mainly with Seattle, but he won a World Series ring for his troubles with that wonderful 1991 Twins team. Their designated hitter for Minnesota was the great Chili Davis, the terrific, underrated Chili Davis. And Chili Davis was lifted for a pinch runner in one of the innings where that run could have come around to be the World Series winning run. The name of the pinch runner was Jarvis Brown. This I am doing from memory. The reason I'm doing this from memory is I have watched that game from beginning to end several times. It's one of my favorite baseball games ever played. Well, Jarvis Brown never scored, and eventually his time at bat came up again, and the pitcher for Atlanta, Alejandro Pena, there was a runner on third with one out with Puckett and Herbeck coming up. And he was like, "No, thank you." Puckett was on fire. They walked Kirby Puckett, then they walked Kent Hrbek with Jarvis Brown coming up. Basically saying, we'll rather take our chances with Jarvis Brown or whatever pinch hitter is coming up rather than dealing with Kent Hrbek or Kirby Puckett. And it's smart. Now, Kelly could have brought up Jarvis Brown, but he wasn't a good hitter. So he brought up Gene Larkin, who was a big star at Columbia University, where he actually broke many of Lou Gehrig's records. And he was one of these good, solid minor league hitters who was a good pinch hitter. And he came up, and the first pitch that Alejandro threw, he hit into left center field. And where it landed probably would have been a double in a normal situation. But because the bases were loaded, in came Dan Gladden. So Gene Larkin was on the bench. He was on the freaking bench and came up to become the hero of heroes in the single greatest World Series I ever saw. I always think about the people who were on the bench. Like Dave Roberts did not start the Dave Roberts game. Dave Henderson did not start the Dave Henderson game. Aaron Boone did not start the Aaron Boone game. Enrique Wilson started the game at third base. And because he had a good matchup head to head with Pedro Martinez. And eventually they pinch hit Ruben Sierra for Enrique Wilson, and Aaron Boone came in as a pinch runner and then later hit the walk-off home run. So anyway, that's the answer there. I was thinking about this the other day and looked at it today, that a lot can happen, as I teased, a lot can happen in 2 months. Some things can remain the same, and some things can be quite fluid. Now, full disclosure right now, while I'm recording this, the Yankees-Tigers game is still going on. The Yankees have a 1-0 lead against the Detroit Tigers as I'm recording this. If anything, the way the Yankees have been playing recently, I'm pretty confident the Yankees are going to win this game. Okay. And if the Yankees win this game, say it with me, the Yankees will have the best record in baseball. Now, let's go back 2 months. It's right now, I'm recording this on the 18th day of August, 2024. So let's go back to the 18th day of June. On that day, the best record in baseball belonged to the New York Yankees. So if I say, okay, the Yankees have the best record in baseball on the 18th of June, they have the best record in baseball on the 18th of August. So they must have been steady, steady, steady. Right? Well, talk to any Yankee fan during that period of time, you would have fired the aforementioned Aaron Boone. You would have said, oh, it's panic. There needs to be accountability. You need to someone's got to lose a job. In a 2-month span, the Yankees went from the best record in baseball on June 18th to the best record of baseball on August 18th. Granted, the middle part, if you charted it, it wouldn't be a straight line. It would look like an earthquake hit. But still, in the end, in a 2-month period, they are right back where they started from. Now, there are some things that are wildly, wildly different. But that kind of struck me as funny. That the best team in the American League at that point were the Yankees, and the Orioles were right behind them. And the best team in the National League at that point, in terms of win-loss percentage, belonged to the Philadelphia Phillies, and behind them were the LA Dodgers. The same as right now. So there is a sense of, I think, abject panic in some people, like, oh, God, what happened? The Phillies got this big long losing streak. Oh, no, all these injuries are going to absolutely torpedo the Dodgers. Someone's got to get fired in the Yankees. What's happening with the Orioles? 2 months have gone by, and they're in the same place. That's baseball, everybody. When you're looking at it up close, it looks like absolute anarchy. But like a mosaic or an expressionist painting, when you step back, you can actually say, maybe this isn't time to panic. But some teams have seen their fortunes change tremendously. At one point, the Cleveland Guardians were the best team in baseball and were running away with the division. 2 months ago, they had a 4.5 game lead over Minnesota. Now they have a 2 game lead over Minnesota. And if the Twins didn't wet the bed and blow that game against the Rangers, where they had a 4-0 lead against Texas, they would be 1 game back. What I'm saying is that the Guardians had a big old lead, and they're allowing the Twins and the Royals are only 3 back right now, to come sneaking back in. The main thing that's incredibly different, because most of what was happening 2 months ago is kind of the same. The Royals are at the end of the wild card race right there. The Red Sox are hanging around, but you just look at the Sox and you say, they're a winning team, but they're not a playoff team. But 2 months ago, the Seattle Mariners had a 10-game lead in the AL West. The Astros and the Rangers were tied and only a few games ahead of the Angels. In other words, the Astros were on the verge of having a collapsing season, and one that makes you go, oh boy, we got to start selling. And the Mariners looked like they were going to be cruising, maybe not passing Cleveland, Baltimore, and New York, but they had the AL West sewn up. As of this recording, the Mariners are 4 games back, and they are not a wild card team. Forget they can only make the playoffs as a division winner, it looks like, and they have dropped 14 games in the standings in 2 months. And that's going to bring me to a topic we're going to talk about a little bit later about we're going to have some serious conversations about who's in charge of some of these teams. 14 games. A lot can happen in 2 months. PrizePick is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePick is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on PrizePick, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get on the daily action with your friends and become part of the PrizePick community today. You can win up to 100 times your money in PrizePick with as few as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. PrizePick is available in more than 30 states across the country, including Texas, Georgia, and right here in California. Download the PrizePick app today. Use the code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePick for a deposit match up to $100. PrizePick, run your game. Thanks so much for making Locked On MLB your first listen. For your second listen, enjoy me, your pal Sully, as I wrap up the season on Locked On A's. Now, you may say, hey, I'm not an A's fan. Why would I listen to that? We're having a lot of fun talking about the team in their final year in Oakland. We talk about the move to Las Vegas. I went on location to Sacramento and traveled all around the Bay Area and an on-location podcast trying to find the places where they proposed to build ballparks. We're having a fun time in the last year of Oakland. So check us out on Locked On A's, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. The single biggest change in the National League in the last 2 months have been Arizona and San Diego. They were both sub-500 teams 2 months ago. And since then, they are slowly creeping up on the Dodgers. The Padres loss and the Dodgers victory. The Dodgers got a turn back the clock game with Clayton Kershaw today. And the Dodgers have actually played pretty well. For all the panic going on in Dodgerville, they've won 7 of their last 10 games. And they still have a 3-game lead over San Diego and a 4-game lead now over Arizona, who's dropped their last 3 games. So it's not all bad for. But with all the pitching issues with the Dodgers, I can't help but think that if you go in a short series, and you know Philadelphia's got good pitching, you know Milwaukee's got good pitching, and you know San Diego can pitch, and there's some good pitching with Arizona, there's a real chance that this may be another division series and out year for the Dodgers, which would be brutal. And in a year when they brought in Ohtani, a year where they had brought in Yamamoto, and they've already brought in Betts, and they've already brought in Freeman, and they've had this sense of they brought in Glasgow, everything has to be pushed to the center of the table. And this team has won the division every year since 2013, with one exception, 2021. And that year they won 106 games, just happened to have the Giants win 107. To have only one championship, yes, I know the Astros are cheating and the Red Sox are cheating, but having only one title in that year, in that time, and have it be the year where no one was in the ballpark because of COVID, there's something that feels like a giant hole in this team. And I don't blame Dave Roberts. I don't. But there may be something they have to do to stir things up a little bit. And I don't know how they can stir things up by bringing in bigger stars than they brought in or spending more money. There is something that may have to happen. Now, I don't think it would be fair if Dave Roberts gets canned, but I don't think fair has anything to do with it. I think that this is a team that if they lost Game 7 of the World Series in the 17th inning, the season would be considered a failure. I think that's absurd too. But if they don't at least win the pennant, the Dodgers are going to probably have a little bit of pressure to relieve Dave Roberts of his duties. Well, there's two other teams that should be making changes to the managerial ranks. And it breaks my heart because they're two teams that I have a huge soft spot in my heart for. First and foremost are the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Pirates are not contending this year, and that's insane to me. This is a team that should be contending. There's talent on this. Yes, they've had injuries. Remind me what team doesn't have injuries? You have players like, Brian Reynolds is a good player. O'Neal Cruz is not a superstar yet, but he's talented. There's talented players like Grandal and Hayes on this team. Are they having great years? No, of course not. But that's not the point. They're quality, good players on this team. You have Mitch Keller, Paul Skeens, and Bailey Falter as a 1-2-3 punch in their rotation. That's pretty darn good. Now, their bullpen's a mess, but you have to be able to find pieces for that to put together. And yet here we are. The Pirates are probably going to have yet another losing season. And, at some point, you have to say, something's got to give a little bit here. I'm not blaming Derek Shelton for everything, but this is his fifth year. His fourth full year, if you don't count the COVID season. And I'm sorry, you give presidents 4 years in a term. This is his fifth year. His first 2 years, they were 100-loss teams. He didn't inherit a great team. Last year, they improved to 76 and 86. This year, they're going to be roughly the same. What player has gotten better under his management? Who is the dominant wild card team in that wide open NL wild card that's pushing the Pirates down? Why isn't this team at least an 83, 84 win team knocking on the door of the wild card? Why is this team going on spiraling losing streaks in the second half of the season? At one point in the middle of June, they were one of the wild card teams. They're 7.5 games back of one of the last wild card spot and sinking like a rock. I'm sorry, there are decent managerial candidates out there, and maybe one who could make the team play better under their tutelage. And that brings us to the Mariners. I mentioned them earlier. 14-game swing. A 14-game swing from in first place by themselves by 10 games to now trailing by 4. And I'm sorry, Scott Servais is the only manager since Lou Piniella in 2001 to lead the Mariners to a postseason berth. They had a 90-win season in 2021 where they just missed the postseason. They won 90 games in 2022 where they went to the division series. Last year, they won 88 games and just missed the playoffs. This year, they're barely above 500. Now, I blame a little bit to the management that there always seems to be shuffling around this team. But this is his 9th year. And at some point, you got to wonder, okay, folks, when is this team going to make the leap? This team, I'll say it, if the Mariners made the playoffs, I'd pick them to win the pennant. If they made the playoffs as the 3rd wildcard team, I would say we are going to see them in the World Series. Instead, we probably won't see them be the 3rd wildcard team. Now, last year, lest we forget, the Seattle Mariners were in first place by themselves in early September. They were, and when they were tied for first, they were in first place by themselves on September 3rd. They had the magic number. They're the 3rd best record in the American League. They were a game ahead of the Texas Rangers and Houston Astros. And in case you're wondering, or you forgot, the Texas Rangers won the World Series last year. In September, they were ahead of the eventual World Series champions. They went 11-15 down the stretch, and now they're a 500 club. They have the pitching to win the pennant. There has never been a Seattle World Series, ever. And this year, if they were in a short series, I take Seattle's pitching 100% over the Yankees, 100% over Cleveland's, 100% over Houston, Minnesota, Kansas City, and Baltimore. I think they'll go to the World Series and get clobbered by Philadelphia. But unlike every other Seattle team in their history, I think they would go to the World Series. And they're not. They probably won't make the playoffs. And these are teams that have to look in the proverbial mirror and ask some hard questions like, do we need to make a change? I think the answer is yes. Okay, you've heard us talk about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, here's something a little different for you. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need to do is have a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. This is a reminder that Locked On has created the first ever national 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube for sports news. Locked On Sports Today is also available on Amazon TV and the free Amazon Fire TV channel app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. So if you listen to Locked On A's, which I'm doing this year, it gives you a chance to hear, I break down in great detail the game that took place in Oakland. There were 32,000 people at Oakland. It was a huge crowd, and it was great to see, it was great to see the Coliseum rocking again for the final San Francisco Giants-Oakland game ever, assuming the A's don't win the pennant and the Giants don't win the pennant. And it was a thrilling game. Came down to the final at-bat with the bases loaded, the winning run on first base, and Walker of the Giants got out of a massive jam. He struck out 5 batters in 2 innings of relief, letting up only 1 unearned run. And it was a truly thrilling game. The Giants are hanging around the wild card at 63 and 63. The A's, by the way, are tied with the Angels. They're almost certain to not lose 100 games this year. If they play 500 ball the rest of the way, or if they play 1 game better than 500 the rest of the way, they'll avoid 90 losses. Remember, they lost 112 games last year, and there's a really good chance that they will avoid 90 losses. That's a big, big turn. And the A's have a shot to catch the Rangers. They're only a few games behind the Rangers at this point. I think it's like 2.5 games behind the Rangers, I think is what it is right now. Yeah, so they're 2.5 games behind. 3.5. Sorry, 3.5 games behind Texas. But that's still they play head to head a bunch. There's a strong possibility that the A's, who are tied with the Angels, just play better than the Angels. They won't finish the year in the cellar. They play 4 games better than the Rangers the rest of the way. They can finish in third place. And then we'll see if Seattle continues to collapse, if the A's can finish their time in Oakland as a second place team. But for people who like throwback games, the A's-Giants game was everything for old school fans to love. Blake Snell, remember him? He won the Cy Young Award. And it turns out he needed spring training, because when he came up without spring training, he signed with the Giants, and he was awful. Oh, what a bust. Well, then he got a little bit of time and a little bit of rehab after an injury, and he threw a no-hitter, and he's pitching like an ace again. And J.P. Sears was going against Snell in this game, which was a 2-game series between the Giants and the A's. And it was an old-fashioned pitcher's duel. It was 0-0 going to the 6th. The A's made it 1-1, and then Ramos hit a home run to make it 1-1. And Blake Snell got into a jam in the 7th inning. Now, Kevin Cash was watching going like, why is Blake Snell pitching in the 7th inning? Don't they know we're supposed to take him out in the 6th? And Bob Melvin did an incredible thing. Even though Snell was struggling, got the bases loaded. Do you know what he did? I may need you to sit down. He let his ace work out of it. They signed him to be an ace. So they said, all right, work your way out of it. And do you know what he did? He got a big strikeout with the bases loaded with 2 outs in the 7th inning. Then they took him out. But he gave him 7 innings, 1 run, 10 strikeouts. You know, if you're going to pay him to be an ace, let him ace. And he aced that proverbial test. And do you know what Kotsay did with J.P. Sears? He let him pitch into the 8th inning. He pitched 7 2/3 innings. Let up 1 run. Granted, he let up 7 hits, but he didn't walk anybody. And he struck out 9. And they brought in Ferguson. Now, I want you to just hear me out. They brought in Ferguson to relieve Sears because it was clear at that moment he needed relief. Do you understand that concept? Sears was pitching very well. And so he went into the 8th inning, and they took the mindset, said, we'll let him pitch until he needs someone to relieve him. It's startling to see someone make decisions based upon, he's pitching well, so why don't we keep him in there until we need someone to come in for him. Now, Tyler Rogers pitched well for the Giants out of the bullpen, and then Ryan Walker, as I mentioned, struck out 5 in his 2 innings of relief. Mason Miller came out and pitched the 9th inning, got a 1-2-3 inning. A bunch of A's fans felt he should have pitched the 10th. Jimenez let up 2 home runs. Ryan Walker let up an unearned run, and then the bases loaded. And instead of taking him out, he struck out the last 3 batters he faced. Now, of course, if Blade or Andujar got a home run for the A's, they probably would have killed Melvin. But I tip my hat saying, hey, do you know what? You let an ace pitcher be an ace. And that is quite a feat. Now, I pulled this today's trivia question actually from a book called, I got this for my birthday, Baseball Addicts Trivia book. And I decided to pull a trivia question for it. So I'm going to give this from the author's Chip Trelix. That's the book, the Baseball Addicts Trivia book. It's a fun book. I'm going to pull a question from here. Normally I come up with questions myself, but I couldn't come up with one today. So the question is, who is the only pitcher to strike out Tony Gwynn 3 times in one game? That's your trivia question. Who's the only pitcher to strike out Tony Gwynn 3 times in one game? Put it right down there on YouTube chat or at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter, or whatever it's called now on Instagram. I'm your pal Sully, but Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Tomorrow's show, we're going to talk a little bit about Olympic baseball and what that could potentially mean for MLB. So, talking about how much has changed and how little has changed in 2 months, and which team should be thinking about a managerial change, and being in awe of an actual pitcher's duel. This has been Locked On MLB. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Please call me Sully.